Today on the Veteran Ventures podcast, we have Brent Maynard. He's an enlisted Marine in the cybersecurity realm, and over the last decade took that experience and built upon it in a number of different jobs, both in the government side and on the corporate side. He's got a lot of great advice for people who are transitioning from service, and I think you're really going to enjoy the episode. Thanks for joining us.
Most people you talk to when transitioning out of the military have never actually transitioned out themselves. You're probably getting a bunch of opinions from people who plan on staying in until retirement and have no idea how to actually show empathy for your situation. This podcast is about providing fresh perspectives and a front row seat for conversations with successful veterans doing big things after leaving the military.
You look so proper with like your hair combed and everything. I like it.
I know the version of me that you see compared to like work Brent is so drastically different. It's hilarious.
I'm getting corporate Brent.
Jack wants more surfing Brent.
Usually I'm rolling
more one wheel.
Exactly. Rolling by on a skateboard in a tank top, probably unshaven and showered. It's great. Beer in hand, probably.
How close do you guys live together? Is it like houses or same street?
10 houses.
Same street.
So it sounds like Jack might have left part of his shoulder on your driveway yesterday.
Oh yeah, I didn't tell Brent. I fell off my road bike like pretty hard on Cuisine. Just absolutely tanked it while going like 20 miles an hour. So
Wait, are you road biking by yourself?
Oh yeah. I rode my bike to my mom's house with Margot, and then I rode back, and it was, I've only crashed one other time, and it was because Courtney crashed and I slammed on the brakes so hard that I went over the front of the bike. But I wasn't even clipped in. That was what's frustrating, because I was just wearing my tennis shoes with my pedals. So I wasn't even really, thankfully, I guess I wasn't clipped in.
Is that a humble brag? You were going 20 without being clipped in, so you're not fast.
No, it wasn't even a humble brag. It was, like I said, it was 2 miles. So I was trying to go as fast as I can. And Cuisine is just like a long straight. So I was just trying to go as fast as I can. It was a full sprint. But yeah, it was
for 2 miles. I expect at least like 30 miles an hour.
Oh no, I'm not that good.
He still had his golf shoes on.
Exactly. No,
golf bag on his back.
And then Brent saw yesterday, Courtney had a slash in the tire. I went there trying to see like where there might be a nail or something. There is a large slash like this big in the tire, and I have no idea how that could be possible.
Oh my God.
And it's not on the side, so it's not like somebody, did it, but it was, I just don't know. And we just got the tires rotated like 4 days ago.
So you just said that, yeah.
It had to have been that. Like, I don't believe in coincidences, like it had to have been something with that. And then we went golfing yesterday and it absolutely poured on us. So I was like, all right, bad things happen in threes. So I'm good for a while now.
Your quota has been met.
Right. Well, hey, let's get into this. We generally start with you a little bit, right? Just kind of giving your background, what your military experience was. If you want to go even earlier than that, just kind of a little bit about your life and what got you to your transition. And then if you want to, go a little bit into what you're doing now, and then we'll start to ask questions about the transition and everything.
Yeah, I'm excited to continue piecing together the parts to the superstar neighborhood that you guys reside in, because it seems like per capita, per density, it's the highest producing neighborhood in America.
Brent knows Nick Smallwood, and yeah, there's quite a few really great characters here in the neighborhood, and veterans too. So we're excited to grow it. Griffin's like national. He's like got this outreach. He's like, I've got this guy in Texas, and I got this other guy. He's like, a globetrotter. And I'm like, yeah, I got some guys on my street that might want to come on the podcast.
Well, like I said, my mentor, I asked him for a bio. I was like, hey, what do you want me to share? Because I'm doing this thing. He's like, hey, what is it? And I was like, oh, it's, transitioning veterans and, those of us who are lucky enough to do something decent, want to give our story. He's like, oh, I'm in. I was like, okay, I'll let him know.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, so my journey was a weird one. I grew up in the Midwest. I was set to be a mechanical engineer going into the automotive industry because that's what my entire family did, and that's just what we were supposed to do. I think a lot of families have that typecasting of, what you should go to college for and do and where you should be going. And So I was all set to go and do mechanical engineering in Michigan. And my buddy joined the Marine Corps and he said it was fun and crazy. He had just gotten back from boot and I was in freshman year of college and just was like, okay, this sounds cool. I want to do this. And I started researching it. I was like, ooh, this military ID thing's pretty neat. Like, what does this do? And gosh, the rest is all crazy. I stepped into the Marine Corps recruiting station and I was running around with those guys. Of course, took my ASVAB and I guess that was decent. So I went and I was like, I'm going to be an intel bubba. I'm going to go carry an M9 and tell people where troop movements are. And I'm going to, but I'm going to be an AC. It'll be fine. Everything's going to be great. Went to boot camp and, I was going through doing the thing. Marines do Marine things and a little bit of crayons, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And they stopped me halfway through and they go, hey, we need you to go over here. And they took me to some office and I'm some scared boot kid, like, what are we doing? And then I was already supposed to get a clearance. So I think it was fine. And they go, hey, do you know what a router is? And it's a computer part, right? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, do you know what a switch is? I was like, yeah, it's another computer networking part. Can you take apart computers? I said, well, yeah. Like, great, we're changing your job. And I went, oh no. I'm a planner. I thought I was going to Dam Neck, Virginia, and I was going to go through the Intel course, and I had all these plans. And I ended up in Pensacola, Florida at Corey Station doing the cyber intel and the cyber courses. So I ended up being like one of the first cyber Marines before the MOS was created. So they were slotting us in this weird MOS called, it was 2651, which is a special intelligence communicator. And I was like, I don't know what this means, but they taught us how to do all the different cyber stuff and it grew kind of as the MOS grew. So I ended up out here in Hawaii and I got stationed at the Naval Information and Operations Command. So I ended up at a joint command after going through all the Marine Corps stuff. Never had really a real Marine boss. I was working for a GS the entire time, supporting counter intel and cyber operations. It was really neat. I can't complain. Definitely a pogue through and through. Never got to deploy. They kept me locked in an air-conditioned building pretty much the entire time doing cyber stuff. So I was super Crayola nerd. It was fun. I can't complain though.
What was your experience with computers or switches or routers before all that? I mean, had you done things technically before? Or they just found someone that could spell switch and were like, you're in?
No, so I was the IT bubba. Like I was always the kid taking stuff apart, which is why I was going into engineering anyway. And I figured out how computers worked. I was, the oldest of a single mom, and there's 3 of us. Computers had to work. My mom went through college when I was a young kid. So like she was always, we had like, it was like an advanced typewriter at that point, I guess, right? So I was always trying to break those things and hack them and take them apart. I was probably the youngest person on LimeWire and Yahoo Pool and chat room. So I just knew the internet and knew computers well from just trying to fix stuff. So it just worked out really well. And yeah, I was building things. I wasn't necessarily doing networking, right? I knew how to set an IP address and fix our home router and, hopefully change AOL whenever it needed to go to call waiting here and there. But that was about it, right?
Right. And how many years did you end up doing in the Marine Corps?
I only ended up doing a single tour. When it came to re-enlistment time, my 1-star was like, Maynard, I can offer you a Big Mac. They weren't really incentivizing cyber retention yet. They hadn't figured it out. Like, hey, we need to keep these people. And I had 6-figure contracts at NSA, like as soon as I was able to hop out. So I got out as a corporal. I was an E4. So I was a young E4. And I was like, I'm staying in Hawaii. Ended up hopping right back on an NSA contract as soon as I got out. And then the weirdest thing happened. I got a phone call one day, similar to like the boot camp experience. And they're like, hey, so what can you tell me about your counter intel experience? And I was like, oh, cyber stuff here and there. They're like, do you want to come work for NCIS? And I was like the TV show? Like, what do you want from me? And they're like, oh no, we want you to come do like computers and we want you to maintain the computers, but also help with investigations for the Hawaii field office for Naval Criminal Investigation Service. And I was like, hell yeah, like, cool, let me do that. So I jumped out and I had no idea what I was getting into. I was 22. So starting at NCIS at 22, I was the youngest kid there. They made fun of me all the time. They're like, did you ride your bike to work today? And they pulled the classic McLovin. I had a McLovin ID on my office door because, yeah, it was fun. Great group, as you know, with the military folks. Even the special agents really clip in pretty well, and they understand military life and how people should operate and interact with each other. So I had the best time. I was doing phone forensics, doing hidden cameras in like lapels and gym bags, and buying guns and drugs and doing counterintelligence. One of the coolest cases I got to work on was a public case here. Actually, it was a Army civilian, Benjamin Bishop. And like I got to directly contribute to that, which was super cool. And ultimately leading to his arrest because he was selling secrets. So that was fun. And then it kind of changed. So my partner at the time was also in the industry and also in the Intel community, and they wanted to move back to Fort Meade. So we transitioned to Maryland. And at that point, I went and joined the FDA and did their counterintelligence stuff there, protecting drugs and devices, which looking back at like COVID and everything else, that would have been super interesting, but didn't stay long. I realized I outgrew the government really quickly, sadly. I wanted to be more on the edge of tech. So I ended up joining Nordstrom, of all places. It was like the sketchiest change in my life. I was like, I'm going to go to a place that sells shoes. Is this really what I want to do? And that turned out being like the best move of my life. So we moved then from Maryland to Seattle, and I started doing forensics and incident response for those guys. And this was during a time when like vulnerabilities, which are like software issues where attackers can break into networks, were like just starting to get like super famous. Like you heard of Stuxnet probably from the military due to Iranian issues, but then like Heartbleed and other big named vulnerabilities started coming out, which was perfect for me and perfect for anybody in the military, actually. And I know we'll get to this, but firefighting and like surprises and where people freak out is where we thrive. So being able to jump into those and normalize those situations was what I loved to do already. So jumping into corporate life, they're like, hey, how do you handle this craziness so well? I was like, well, I guess, it's just, we're trained that way and I thrive on this stuff. So did really well there, ended up growing out of that, met my mentor there, which is important. And, he really helped me transition. He was an Army guy as well. So there was a debug period where I had to figure out like, hey, you can't talk to people this way and you can't be so direct and aggressive. And you got to kind of debug and normalize your conversations, especially in the tech world. And then especially in Seattle, it's a whole demographic of conversation and people, you get the Seattle freeze where people don't want to talk to you and things like that. And then it kind of took off from there. I ended up joining a company named Akamai, which is actually back where I'm at now, and then started doing product management. I realized, like I said, the tech wasn't going fast enough. So I wanted to build tech. So ended up building products at a few different companies, Microsoft, Amazon, Akamai, jumped out of product for a little while and decided I wanted to lead teams again. And I went to Charles Schwab. I was the managing director of cybersecurity there, doing pen testing, which is, hacking yourself, and then threat intelligence, which again bodes really well for military acumen, is, what are our enemies doing and how do we track them? It was a lot of fun. In between time, I joined a startup after that because I was doing M&A for Schwab. And I helped do the cyber due diligence for TD Ameritrade. So that was a $30 billion deal, which was the craziest thing. I never thought I'd be doing that. But again, something just being able to manage your stress and manage large projects and get through it. Oddly enough, the Marine Corps has helped a lot in those huge corporate situations and being able to kind of work through those.
Yeah, I wanted to double down on that specifically because you kind of mentioned your transition to Nordstrom was maybe the biggest transition, and everything else, of course, those are big steps and growth. But going from the government to Nordstrom, I guess my question for somebody who is transitioning out would be, do you think you had to do that little stint with the non-military government side in order to be successful at Nordstrom and beyond? Or do you think your advice to somebody would be more, hey, maybe try to just jump straight into that corporate side instead of taking the time in the government?
I don't think it was required at all. I think it was an interesting transition out of military-based government, and it kind of gave a peek of what was coming. But no, not at all. And I think the programs now, and I've been a part of the military transition programs at every corporation that I've been at since, are a lot better at helping. You get a mentor, you get people you can talk to, and they'll help you to kind of translate your military speak, especially when it comes to like sending emails and in meetings. So I think the rails are there now to make it safer and feel better for those who want to do it. So I think it's fine now. You don't need to worry about it. It's there. And I had a lot of support. You'd be surprised, especially in my field. You run into everybody. And I was just at a customer meeting 2 weeks ago, And I was explaining, my background to a customer, and they're like, "Oh, I worked on, Marine Corps Base Hawaii. This is what I did." And you're like, "Oh, great." You run into more of your own than you realize. And it's
Mhm.
really interesting, but you wouldn't know it because a lot of us have kind of been in different roles and done different things, but everybody has a decent background somewhere.
Of the military transition programs you did at some of those kind of larger corporations, did you feel like any of them particularly did it well? And like, what was it that made those a successful program?
Oddly enough, the big corporations do it the best. Microsoft and Amazon, I think, have the best programs. And I don't know if it's a game of numbers, like you just have enough people who are willing to do a little bit of work. But with the smaller ones, I noticed it takes somebody who's super interested in doing it, and they're really the Sherpa for that type of situation. If you don't have somebody who's really dedicated to it, you're not going to get it. But the hiring programs and the support programs for Microsoft and Amazon are phenomenal. And if somebody has a clearance, it's an easy transition over. I think that was one of the hardest things, just realizing I didn't need my clearance to be successful and do fun things anymore. But those companies will take you and pay you more if you have one, and they're great support systems. But again, you're joining a lot of like-minded folk, because in cybersecurity particularly, and in the incident response side, they love their military folks just because the ability to handle stress.
Yeah, I kind of want to expand on what you just said there, because I think we've had conversations about that specifically. It's like, if you
Yeah.
have that clearance, and even if you don't, just have the military experience, some people might, you know, limit themselves to jobs that require that. And the argument from our side is expand your horizons a little bit, look at what could possibly interest you outside of just that one top secret clearance that might get you the job. Because you mentioned that, like, once you did that, it kind of opened up a lot more opportunities for yourself.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest parts of moving to Nordstrom. That was my first uncleared role, right? Like I was like, gosh, what is this? And I don't know if it was the environment I was in all my cleared spaces, where they kind of drive it home that your clearance is worth money. And
Mhm.
if you have this, you're set. And I kind of found the opposite. I did find myself a bit limited with contract work and other things when I was first getting out and trying to find roles. I had a bit of time, I think, SkillBridge didn't exist when I was getting out. So, we didn't have that type of thing. I didn't have that type of nice transition period. It was like bing, bang, boom. I think I had, a few weeks of end of service leave, and that was about it. But yeah, so make sure you're looking at just about everywhere, and don't be afraid of startups. I had probably the most fun at startups too, just working through a lot of the different problems that they had while still moving very quickly. You don't have to worry
Mhm.
about the corporate kind of bureaucracy if you're afraid of it.
Yeah, that's kind of why this podcast exists, because we know that people transitioning out of the military are somewhat aware of like contracting jobs, or if you want to go get a job at a range, or you can move into those positions, and that's definitely doable. We're trying to show people that, yeah, like there are other opportunities out there. You don't need to limit yourself just to what you know, because you've been surrounded by a bunch of people who are in the military. You're surrounded by these other civilians who were in the military, transitioned out, and just stayed with that same unit or whatever. But we're just trying to, kind of spread the knowledge on what's out there and what's available for people.
You mentioned leaning into the startup world. Do you have any practical ways, or where would somebody start if they're like, that sounds like a good move? I've heard that, and I know I could wear maybe multiple hats and learn a lot of good skills there, but I don't really know off the top of my head. Like, I don't have a friend that's got a startup. How would you suggest that someone to start kind of going down that road?
Gosh, you have so many new tools available to you for these types of things. Generative AI has really changed how the world does business. Selfishly, that's one of the things that I work on in the industry. I use it in day to day. So I would use, just normal searches. You don't have to there's not a secret code, there's not a handshake or a door that you have to find. Start Googling who are the top startups out there, who are the up and comers, and start looking at the roles that they're looking to hire for. And don't lock yourself into titles and positions and money. Business development is a great place to start. I talk to all my cyber nerds, including my younger brother who's in cyber as well. Go do some time in sales, technical sales. Learn how to talk to people and learn how to bridge that gap between nerd speak and business speak. And especially at a startup, you'll learn that very quickly. Don't be afraid of the role. Go do it and just learn the business. And to find it, you just ask ChatGPT, what are the top new startups that are hiring? Look for great private equity firms and look where they're spending their money. That's probably one of the easiest ways to do it. And I say easy. Private equity firms are big cash cows that are looking for up and coming places. Griffin, I think you might even know a little bit more about that than I do. So just find the places where the money is flowing, and you'll see it in the news. You'll hear about it. You can pick it up in any magazine, in any airport or gas station or wherever you browse, Target, albeit, and you'll find places. You can always reach out to me. I'm always available to talk about that stuff too.
Another thing with that is like when you're transitioning, it's like, look at your skills, but the skills that you have in the military, you mentioned before, it's dealing with stress. It's dealing with the unknown. You're a corporal in the Marine Corps, but you've already been told what was on your shoulders as a corporal in the Marine Corps is different than what any 22-year-old is doing out in the civilian side. So I think relying on those non-tangibles that the military provides, like, yeah, even if you left the military with a great set of skills that the military taught you, but a lot of people who are combat arms don't feel like they're leaving with this set of skills that they can just apply. But what they do have is responsibility. They do have the ability to show up on time, do what you say you're going to do. There's a lot of things that people can rely on and do well in startups, even if it's not necessarily their cup of tea right off the bat.
That's a good point. Yes, I am in cybersecurity, but I work a lot with my other partners in the business, physical security, privacy, and any of the business units. There is a way to link it. Combat arms folks, you understand force protection. You can help understand how the C-suite needs to be protected, how the data center needs to be protected, different controls and why you would do the things you would do, how to interview people, what threats look like, why they're threatening, especially in the uncertainty in today's world and markets. I mean, those skills are huge when it comes to protecting companies. And a lot of friends that I've had, and maybe they were cyber, but then they went special forces, whether it's radio recon or what have you. They love their physical skills and they don't want to let that go. So they'll join physical security groups, for example, like at Amazon. I have a bunch of friends there doing that type of work. So there is something. There's a lot of skills. And when we think about all the nasty security trainings and CBTs we've taken over the years, that trains you for a lot of the corporate stuff. When you think about it, you have kids coming in, and I say kids loosely, but you're a kid till you're 30, I think. And when you show up to a big corporation coming out of college, you haven't been taught like basic security principles, So the military folks bring a lot of that just inherently, like how to be secure, how to lead people, adaptability and problem solving, the ability to withstand some bureaucracy and some craziness going on as org changes and things happen. Think of all the changes of command, and every time you got a new squad leader or a new platoon sergeant or a new company commander, that happens in corporations every 3 to 6 months. So being able to navigate those situations is super helpful. And there's intangibles that you have. So don't take the job description completely for what it is. Figure out how you can apply different skills in life.
Yeah, Brent, I'd love to take a second and kind of tap into your mind space when you were making that transition to Nordstrom and kind of the biggest leap that you made. I'm sure the money looked better on the other side. I'm sure that you felt like the military was holding you back in a number of ways, but there's a familiarity with where you were. And making that step had to feel like taking a step out of the comfortable, out of the zone that you'd been in for half a decade or more. What was going through your head, and what was it an easy decision to make to go ahead and jump to a more lucrative position or something that was a little bit less constrained?
It'll blow your mind. I actually took a pay cut, which is the weirdest thing, right? So moving from the DMV area to Seattle, I had a great role in the government. I was set. I could have retired from that role if I really wanted to. I guess that was pre-Doge, but I mean, relevant, especially for tech folks. So yeah, I took a pay cut, but I just didn't enjoy the DMV area. It just wasn't working well for us, and it just family life. We didn't like it. We didn't grow up there. So it just, and after being in Hawaii for so long, like that was probably more of the problem, was debugging from Hawaii back to DMV. It was crazy. So I decided I wanted to get either back to Hawaii or the West Coast as quick as I could. And that's how I ended up back in Seattle, and why Nordstrom was one of those choices. Thinking about the transition itself, I just didn't know how people behaved, and I'd never lived in Seattle before. It's still very different than Hawaii, and just learning how people interact, and there's less lines and less expected chain of command things. So I thought that was limiting for me at first, was because I was afraid to kind of work among some of the other lines of business without letting my boss know or getting like permission at first, which is so funny to think about. I think that's a big difference between enlisted and officers as well. Officers are supposed to be out doing the butterfly thing, kissing babies and shaking hands, compared to, as an E4, E5, and even below, you're just doing your job and kind of following and trying to stay under the radar. So learning to become the radar and learning to network and make friends and ensure that you have a good group of folks inside and outside your business will help that transition a lot. I had that, luckily enough, and I had people I could talk to.
I think a lot of people would be really surprised to hear that the Nordstrom was kind of a step back from a pay perspective. I think a lot of people, they transition out and they're expecting, the military compensates you in a lot of ways, but financially is not at the top of that list. And so people would think that you might be taking a step up compensation wise, but I think that's really interesting. And maybe it was like some of the skills you developed or kind of stepping out of those constraints and into a world where you could then make additional moves, which you obviously did, that paid financially in spades, I'm sure. But is that kind of part of your trajectory as well when you moved to Akamai and then to Schwab and then Microsoft? As you kind of made those progressions, were those financial steps as well along the way? And because this is a long way of asking the question, but a lot of people will say keep on building the same bridge at a place and eventually it'll start having its financial rewards. But there's the other kind of train of thought. If you jump around to different corporations, you can kind of upscale your compensation accordingly, each kind of step along the way.
Yeah, definitely. Gone back and forth of not chasing pay and not chasing title, which is tough. It's kind of ingrained in us as military folks, is like, you want the next rank, you want the next pay grade, you want that higher BAH, and you have to decouple from that and really accept where you're at and thrive in it and understand what you can learn and what you can get from each level. And the rest kind of comes naturally. It took me the longest time to even figure that out. I got my butt kicked really bad through a promotion, and I had a long 6 months where I had to upscale myself quite quickly because I realized that maybe I made it too fast of a jump. And it's surprising. It can be difficult. But yes, there's a fine line with jumping for money. So you need to spend time long enough to prove you can get through a project execution. And there's a specific timeline on that, so you don't get flagged as a career jumper. Because if folks are coming back and like, hey, I need somebody I can rely on, I need somebody to build a team, and I need somebody to operate this program for an extended period of time, and it looks like you change roles every 12 to 13 months, what's up with that? So you have to really spend at least 24 to 36 months at a place. But I'll caveat it with, it isn't the same set of corporate America that the different generations before us grew up in. There is no loyalty to you, or no loyalty to, you shouldn't have loyalty necessarily to your company, and the fact that you would harm your career or yourself if you have a great opportunity and it's within 12, 18 months or even less. There's no reason you should say no because you're going to hurt somebody's feelings. Don't burn bridges, but definitely have the conversation. Hey, this cool thing came up, or this new opportunity came up, or hey, I'm going to go start my own thing now, which people should be very aware of, that that's okay to do and you can do it. Don't be afraid of it. And those things are okay. Just, I would challenge people to look at what the role is asking you to do instead of looking at the compensation. Money only keeps you happy for so long.
I think it's very dependent on personality as well. So some people really thrive in that uphill battle and learning the steep learning curve. And I think, those types of people might more often choose to switch a little faster just because they like that new learning curve and everything. But there's other people who are like, no, I'm perfectly happy where I'm at. I like to go a little bit deeper and understand, the problem set a little bit more broadly. And I think that it really does kind of come down to personality wise, what you're good at and what you can do. Because some people just like to take the baton and start running. And, others are like, no, let me just run the marathon and let's get it done. I think that's great.
With the former group, Jack, the ones that like to accelerate things or that are kind of could be called shiny object chasers in a certain perspective.
Yeah.
I think that, especially for the officer side and the military, you have a very set timeline. Like you hit 4 years, you're promoting, you hit 10 years, like it's all very set. And there's not really anything you can do except maybe accelerate that by 1 year here or there. a little bit less so on the enlisted side, but still very much in place. And yet when they jump into the civilian world, they experience like, oh, there's no timeline. I could promote in 6 months if I perform well. I could get a new job in 12 months and jump like three rungs or infinitely high. So I think that it almost becomes a game. Like, how much can I accelerate this, since I was constrained by the military pay and promotion structure? But I'm curious, Brent, without getting maybe too personal, I'd love to hear, you said you kind of outpaced, or maybe you got a promotion a little bit too early. Are you able to, or willing to share some of the details on that, kind of as you pursued this acceleration, maybe out kicking your coverage temporarily, or how that went down?
Yeah, I had stepped out of people leadership, and we should touch on that for a second. Is to promote and to be good in your role, you do not have to become a people leader. I think I can't stress that enough. In the military, we call them warrant officers, and warrants sometimes have people, but like, to be an expert in your domain and to scale up is okay. You don't need to become a manager to take your skills to the next level, and you don't need to take on people. Not everybody is a people leader, and don't necessarily force yourself to become a people leader. But you'll also find that people who don't want to be people leaders would probably make the best people leaders, which is ironic. So it was with Schwab when I first checked in. I was the youngest managing director. Again, I found myself in this spot where I was super young, checking into this program, and I was surprised. I was like, wow, this is a huge remit for this project. I started out as a technical director and then became a managing director. So a technical director is, like I said, it's more of the, you're a CWO something, and you're the leader of a technical group. So I ran the red team. My goal was strictly to break stuff and break into stuff and hack things. And I had a team of folks. We just kind of went through, and that was our job. And we did that well. And then we started making recommendations. And then they're like, Brent, we want you to lead, these 5 programs now. And I was like, whoa, it's not necessarily what I was ready for, but it worked out. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. And the irony of it is, I was still going to college for my bachelor's degree at this time. I was a late college student. I didn't get my bachelor's in computer science until I was 30. And I did it for my kids more so than I didn't need it for corporate. I was already making more than $200,000 a year at this point. I didn't need a bachelor's degree really, but I got it. And granted, my boss at Schwab at that point was like, hey, are you going to get this? It looks good on paper to the regulators if you have this. And I said, sure, I'll finish it. I had a really great mentor during that time. He saved my bacon more than 10 times probably, and just chats and level sets, and probably saving me without me knowing half the time from deep holes. So remember, it's the squad mentality still comes into play, and good leaders still come into play. What was the adage? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I can't stress that enough in the corporate world. You still have to bring everybody with you. You still have to have the support system, because as much as it feels alone, you still have a squad, and you still have a good group of people that if you take them with you, you'll have people for life. I've had a lot of those. I've had people that we've kind of transitioned around together, which is kind of funny. So definitely build that.
Was that mentor the same one you mentioned from Nordstrom?
Yeah. Him and I have worked together for the past like 15 years, like in various forms, not always directly at the same company. There's a few good stories there.
I think I want to just touch on one part of what you said. Right at the beginning, you admitted that you were outpaced a little bit and you had to work on yourself to get to that point. And that's something to key in on. And I know Griffin knows that I'm huge on the growth mindset, and that was a big part of like my command philosophy and everything. But I think it's super applicable. And what you just said there is why you're successful, in my opinion, right? I'm sure that there's a lot of other reasons, but just that alone breeds success in I own what my faults are, and I'm going to work on them. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think that alone will lead to, if anybody listening to the podcast can accept that as their mantra for how they need to, improve and take things head on, take life, I think that alone could help you accomplish anything. Because like what you said is like, you got into this position and there were probably things you needed to work on, and you just did that. You just worked on them, got better, and then you were fine. But there's a lot of people who won't admit that kind of thing. And when you don't admit it, then you never get better. And you never actually truly grow without the actual admitting that there's some room for improvement.
It comes with time. I mean, younger Brent was definitely the smartest person in the room always, and would make sure everybody knew it. You get burnt eventually. and you're poked or something bad happens, you trip. Hopefully it's not as bad for everybody. I love to do things the hard way. So as much as I would love to say I was that self-aware, that took time. It definitely took time, and you may not always realize it right away.
Brent, taking this a slight tangent here, but I love a quote that I saw of yours. It says, "Curiosity and creativity outside of the office fuel success inside it." And I see you enjoy travel, different cuisine,
Yep.
and surfing. Could you talk a little bit more about your hobbies and how those have informed success, both professionally and otherwise?
Yeah, first and foremost, I mean, I spend a lot of time on technology. I am not just doing cybersecurity and technology work for a career. It pays well, so it works out. But my passion is really in technology, how things work, why things are doing the things they're doing, and where we're going. I love dystopian novels and The Matrix, like everybody else, I guess. But just seeing where things could go and what technology could inform and where we could be in 300-400 years and what that looks like is super intriguing to me. I enjoy reading, I enjoy podcasts and blogs a lot. Just what are other people learning? What can I learn from them? And yes, travel. I'm always chasing the next bowl of ramen, huge ramen guy. I enjoy good pizza, which is, I know, probably not the greatest thing to always be eating, but I was just in Vegas. There's a really good pizza spot in the Cosmopolitan. And, with my line of work, I'm always out taking people to dinner too. So it works out well for me because then I can be like, oh, I want to go check out this new place. And I can make sure I get reservations there and we can get what we want to get, whether it's like, finding Carbone in Vegas, right? Like, so in New York or the East Coast, you're paying $1,000 a reservation for that, right? So being able to couple my loves together, if you will, and being able to talk to people. I guess it's three things: cybersecurity, social interactions, and food. You mix those things together, and I'm a happy camper. We were talking in the beginning, and Jack mentioned that he was out riding his road bike. I was like, oh, I need a road bike buddy. I love road biking and mountain biking, hiking when I can. I have two teenage girls. Well, one preteen, one teenage girl. So trying to convince them to go hiking all the time is kind of a pain in the butt. So usually I'm chasing them, trying to drag them along for travel. And yeah, of course, surfing when I can and getting out. And just, I love what Hawaii brings and gives, and being able to enjoy the friendships and the culture here. And I golf, but not well enough to have a good conversation and chase the little white ball around the course for the day. Yeah.
As long as you're able to chase it. 'Cause I often hit it so poorly, I can't even chase it anymore. I just got to start with a new one.
I've said before that I am not necessarily a connoisseur of many things, but I'm a lover of many things. And I feel like, Brent, you might be the opposite. I feel like you are absolutely a connoisseur of quite a few things. If I ever need like advice on something, I'm like, I bet Brent already has done all the research on it.
Yes. I guess you could describe that as a hobby. I am a well-informed, I would say a well-informed buyer, but I'm a well-informed of doing anything. Like, I need to do research on things. I don't consider myself a planner. My wife is the planner. But if you need information on how to plan or what to plan, I have that information. This is why I love different AI as well, because it's a scaler for me. I can learn so much more quickly.
Yeah, Brent and I have nerded out about ChatGPT and the ways to use it quite a few times.
Brent, has Jack told you how much he's cheating on Microsoft Excel with ChatGPT now? It's an atrocity.
I avoid Excel like the plague, so I haven't gone too far there, but maybe Jack can teach me some things later.
The backstory there is Jack once told me that, we were talking about that you need three things in life: something to keep you fit, something to make you money, and something to stay creative. And Jack said that Microsoft Excel was his creativity outlet. I think you also, not to put words in your mouth, Jack, I think you also said it was your physical outlet too for your hands, just like a lot of fast twitch.
Yeah.
I think there's Excel like world championships, Jack. Maybe something you should look into.
Oh yeah. I can't compete with those guys.
We had just come away from seeing one of our peers or a guy that we worked with use a calculator to calculate cells in Microsoft Excel because he didn't know how to use functions. So that was the juxtaposition of our Army experience there. Brent, before we get off the topic, I'd love to hear your favorite dystopian novel or series. Always open to get a recommendation there.
It's tough. I was always a Ready Player One fan, and then it blew up and got super famous with the movie. So I would still say Ready Player One. My dog's name is Artemis. So Ender's Game is always fun. I don't know if you guys, And that was required reading for me in the military, which is funny. But it's just that whole series in Orson Scott Card. It's just great.
Yeah,
Unless we got into like TV, and then I have a few other ones. But
I
that's
feel
awesome.
like one of the things we ask everybody is just, and you've already provided a ton, but we like to ask if you can provide something to our audience, what would that be? And then we'll also ask if the audience can provide something to you, where could they focus on while listening?
yeah, when I think about what I can give and what I've done, one of the things that's been really interesting for me, and I've often joked with my friends and then the folks, is I love building people. And I've often helped and brought folks along with me to a lot of the careers. And we've kind of split off throughout the years. Like people end up, we move together until somebody finds their niche and then they stay. And then, they do really well. So if anybody needs any coaching in cybersecurity careers or just career development, they can reach out. I've become, even without ChatGPT, I've become an expert resume writer and just how resumes need to be formatted. And now we really have to focus on how we can get through AI in order for those resumes to be successful. And then just even cybersecurity stuff. One of the things we ran for a long time with my crew and scaling people was we had hacker night at my house every Thursday night. Bring a dish, bring a drink. I'd set up the projector and we would just hack away. I had a bunch of different systems and everyone would have a task. So if it's professional, if it's personal, if it's technical, you want to understand how to translate military jargon to cybersecurity worlds, you want a resume review, you want to understand if the offer you're getting is good, let me know. I'm always traveling to a bunch of cities, so I probably will visit your city sooner or later if you ever want to meet in person and have a beer. Network, if you want to network with me and help get networking in other places, or you're trying to reach a certain company, or chances are I know their CISO and I've taken them to dinner, and I can definitely work with you to see if it's a good fit.
Awesome. And then what can they do to help you?
Yeah, great question. If you are one of those people and you need cybersecurity help, or you want somebody to come speak at one of your events, or you want somebody to come impart cybersecurity knowledge, definitely willing to sign up for any large event, from even small events. I was in Seattle at the Cybersecurity Summit last week, giving keynotes and different presentations for folks. And then I'm submitting my Black Hat talk this week. So hopefully I'll be in Black Hat giving a stage presentation later on this summer. But follow me on LinkedIn, figure out where I'm traveling. Let's meet up for a drink or dinner, and we can just chit chat and network. I'm just looking to meet people and figure out, who loves cybersecurity too.
One of the things I love about your story is that everyone says the best company or the best kind of professional endeavors is just you pushed out into the world. And that's exactly what it seems like you're doing. It's like what Brent does on the weekends, what he does with his friends, hacking in his home on his off time with some pizza or whatever, is exactly what you're doing full time, because you've kind of found your niche. And I'm curious, you mentioned friends that you've kind of bounced around with or worked in different places with that have all found their niche and then kind of gone deep in that area. Is there any trend that you've seen or any kind of immediate light bulb that goes off when somebody finds that niche? Like, how does someone know when to stop the bouncing and go deep, I guess is the question.
I don't think there's a tangible thing you can touch and say, hey, I found this thing and this is why it's perfect. It's culture, it's person dependent. I had my very first buddy who, and these are friends, right? They may have worked for me. I run a very flat leadership and everybody's friends. And I think that's helpful too. He ended up at Google. He's leading their incident response team for a couple groups there. And just the culture worked. I had a couple folks who made 3 hops with me and ended up at Microsoft and ended up at like Marriott, for example, leading their security programs. And it just works for them. They're able to be where they want to be. They're able to build their families and do the travel they like to do and still enjoy what they're building or enjoy the programs they're running. So ultimately, it comes down to not staying stagnant or not getting complacent, but making the changes and ensuring you're doing what keeps you happy and you're not just there for a paycheck. You'll notice it, you'll feel it. I was at a bunch of different roles. AWS is not an easy place to work. It's hard, right? It's a crazy place to be. I learned so much, but I quickly realized like that culture wasn't for me. And that's why I came back to Akamai. And I took a 10-year break from Akamai, right? And I went back and I kind of went out and I realized these are my people. This is where I wanted to be. You know when you know.
Last thing I wanted to highlight, and I wanted to give you a chance to tell the full story, is you guys moved back to Hawaii after a long time away.
Oh,
And then how many months was it before you? So 6 months later, I'll let you tell the story.
yeah.
I think you know where I'm going with it.
Yeah. So my wife and I are both Amazonian. We both work for Amazon Web Services at the time. I was leading security product for security investigations and response. No surprise there. My wife leads programs within the internal security team. And as you saw in the news, return to office started hitting. And I got notified pretty early that, hey, Brent, you need to return to office and you can either choose Seattle or Boston. A lot of the product managers were in Seattle, but my entire engineering team was in Boston. I'd never lived in the Northeast before, I had no idea what was happening. And I said, well, I think I want to make Amazon a thing. We're going to do this. And we picked up everything after moving back to Hawaii and moved to Boston. And we moved to Boston in like September. So we lived in Boston from September until roughly May. So yeah, enough for the kids to start school and then for us to go, oh, we don't like it here.
Nice
Now looking
weather.
back, it wasn't that bad. We really enjoyed the relationships we made and the food, but it just wasn't home for us. I'd go visit there anytime. But yeah, and we moved back as quickly as we could. Self-funded that time.
The Boston poke wasn't to your liking?
No, it wasn't. I'm not a lobster roll fan. So it
Not
just
enough
didn't,
tartar
didn't
sauce.
quite work out. I mean, we had an NHL team for the short time. I went to a lot of sports games and stuff. So there's, silver linings everywhere you go.
Right.
But it
But
just,
now you're
it
back.
wasn't
You're
quite
back
for
in
us.
paradise.
Yes, everybody's back and quite happy with it at this point. You always get tricked here. You're like, oh, I could go live somewhere else. And I get to travel enough where I don't have that itch anymore. And it's every time I get off the airplane in Honolulu and you breathe the air again, you go, right. This is why I'm here.
I have so many questions about threat actors and larger kind of
Sure.
security issues and things, but maybe it's a better conversation over a beer next time you're in Raleigh, North Carolina, which I hope that
Definitely.
happens. But I
The
do have a
Honolulu of the South.
Yeah. They call Honolulu the Raleigh of the West. Anyways, I guess my question is, let's say there's someone listening to this who is one of those Marines who wasn't tapped on the shoulder because he's a smart guy. He was tapped on the shoulder and they're like, hey, you spelled your name incorrectly. Can you come over to this other room with us? So what can just a standard non-cyber nerd do to keep themselves secure? What sort of practical takeaway could someone who's not a tech person necessarily pull from this as far as their own use of AI, cybersecurity, kind of the whole 9 yards?
Yeah, first and foremost, it's a technical thing. Don't reuse passwords. We'll just set the groundwork there. Don't reuse passwords. Get a password manager, and your browser is not a good password manager. Aside from that, have a passion in something. Figure things out. Don't be afraid to try new things. The thing that hurts the most is probably worth it. The scariest thing is probably the best thing. Use that with good judgment when I say that. And if you're a young Marine listening to that, getting married or that new tattoo is not the answer, more than likely.
Or a Mustang.
Or a Mustang, yes. No charters, you don't need a car. Don't get a car. It's just trouble. That's another beer conversation. I have a great one there. I did those things. That's why I say don't do those things. Yeah, find a passion and don't be afraid to switch services. I love the Marine Corps and everything it did for me, but you might find me in the Coast Guard or the Space Force or something if I had to do it over, or maybe even the Navy. Sorry, I know you guys are both Army, but it's a huge service. I would go for a smaller service, I think. Other than the Navy, but
better
accommodations and they treat people a little bit differently. And I know things are getting better and there's certain things, but definitely look around and think about skill sets and what you can learn. You can learn something from every situation, and there's times and places where there's, schooling available or different certifications available. And if, they're not made available to you, go seek it out yourself. Sitting around and just waiting for something to come to you is not necessarily going to bode well. Use the discipline you have and abuse the discipline you have for the better and create a plan. It's always worth, people talk about goal writing and thinking about the things that you want to do and where you want to be, but working backwards from things. And that's a very Amazonian trait is, figure out where you want to be, work backwards from that instead of trying to work out, because people are like, oh, well, tomorrow I'm going to do this. And, Thursday is that. And then 10 years from now, I'm going to do that. Like, well, where do you want to be in 10 years? Right. And then get there.
Yeah.
Do you have any concrete ways that you work backwards? And I'll give a personal example. My wife and I love the concept of a vivid vision, where we very clearly and vividly describe out what our life looks like in 3 years in the third person, as if it's like a newspaper clipping or something. And then you work backwards from that kind of clear pictures. Do you have anything similar to that you personally use, or maybe that the good folks at Amazon?
Not necessarily. Vivid vision sounds very interesting. That is more Amazonian, I think, than you think it is. That's very much like a 6-pager. You need to add an FAQ to the bottom of that vivid vision on questions people might ask, and then start answering those. And I think that would be pretty interesting. I'm going to have to try that. You'll have to send me details on how to execute that properly. No. So what we look at is taking kind of the entire family into account and looking at everybody's goals. So we're forecasting kind of where everybody's trajectories are based on what they want to do and where they want to be. I'm in a much different spot with somebody who's like choosing their college and things like that right now. And, my house is going to be shifting and changing from a people perspective. So we have like retirement goals. So we're setting things that way and working towards those. But we are nomadic kind of when it comes to how we want to be. We know kind of we can plan. And this is totally counterintuitive to what you would think I would be, which is kind of funny. But we're definitely go with the flow type of people when it comes to those types of things. We plan the best we can and we try and fit things in, but we also try not to be too rigid. If we want to go do something at the end of the day, we'll just go do it randomly. We're very spontaneous in that regard. I had a work trip to Vegas last week or 2 weeks ago. And I took my wife and my one daughter like 2 days before. I was like, hey, you're coming. And so, we didn't plan for it. We pulled a kid out of school a week before spring break. It's crazy. Who does that? But we do it. We do those types of things. We try and have a lot of fun. And as long as we're together and we're doing things together, I think that's the most important thing for us.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It's not about the plan, it's about the planning, right? Like you can be spontaneous if you've put the effort into like understand like the different branch plans, and there's other things that can happen, and you're still going to be successful even with the spontaneity. And I think it suits your family really well. I have nothing but respect for the way that you raise your kids. They're very respectful, very like clearly intelligent kids who know what they want. They say what they want. I mean, it's just the right way to raise kids. And I respect you guys a lot for that. So that's awesome.
They've only hacked Jack's Wi-Fi a couple times. So,
oh man, I tell you, that's a big problem. Trying to build cybersecurity controls for technical age young women is insane.
Right.
Insane. But yes, I appreciate that, Jack. Thank you so much. Raising young people and especially young women it's the wildest job I ever signed up for, that's for sure. So
yeah,
I commend anybody who's doing that. It's tiring.
This has been great. It's great getting to know you.
Who is your mentor that you said might want to be on the podcast?
Yeah, great question. And my biggest shout out really, Steve Winterfeld, Army veteran. So he's one of yours. His mentorship, he's been my work dad and like my personal dad forever. Like he's got me through work stuff. If he knows something's going on in my personal life, he'll reach out. He's got me through a lot of different transitionary periods in my life. He did 20 years active duty, retired as a lieutenant colonel. He did the opposite. He was a Ranger guy who went to military cyber ops. So it's kind of funny. So we ended up in the same kind of fields, so we were able to talk to each other. But he ended up being the CISO for Nordstrom Bank is how we met. So the bank and the retail sides were different. And my joke is that I hired him to be my boss. So yeah, he came over and he was the chief information security officer at the bank, and then came and helped out on the actual retail side. And then he's the one who pulled me to Charles Schwab and gave me the opportunity to follow my face and learn from it. And then ironically enough, as I grew at Schwab, he transitioned to Akamai, because I left Nordstrom and went to Akamai. And then he took my old role at Akamai, ironically enough. And he just semi-retired. Well, he's chasing a new venture. So he left Akamai and I took his old role at Akamai. So we've definitely been dancing together for a number of years. He loves disc golf and he lives in Colorado now. I say now, he's always lived in Colorado, but he's still living in Colorado. he just started this new thing called cyber vigilance advice, where he's doing like fractional and advisory CISO stuff. So if anybody's looking for a older guy to give you some lessons learned on how to do and how not to do things in cybersecurity, he is definitely your guy. He's a lot of fun. Thanks for asking.
I don't imagine you went up to him and asked him to be your mentor. It blossomed more organically. He probably saw a lot of potential in you. You saw the sage advice that he offered.
Yeah, definitely. He's just a dad, honestly. He's a dad of young women as well. So it's just kind of, I had my first kid, I had the oldest by then, but he was around for my second one. And yeah, it just happened. Military, and we find each other. It just happens. But I think it's a good point you call out, is like there's two types of mentors, right? There's a mentor for like long-term growth and like personal and professional, and those sometimes find you or you find them, and it just happens organically. And then there's very specific mentors, like I want to be better at public speaking, so I'm going to find somebody who's really good at public speaking. I'm going to do a short-term mentorship with them. Or writing was awful for me when I first joined Amazon. So yeah, definitely it's okay to have multiple mentors, and you'll find the long-term one and it'll just happen. And then the short-term ones, be precise about them, be definitely thoughtful, and go after those, and find them, make them mentor you.
Well, hey, Brent, I appreciate it. Sure, we'll see you sometime this week. But thanks again for spending an hour with us. And it's great advice. I think it's actionable advice for anybody who's transitioning out. And I think our first step is to get Marines to be able to put their password into Spotify and be able to log in. And then maybe they'll be able to listen to the podcast, but they got to put the crayon down first. So we're working on it.
New product development. It's a Crayola friendly touchscreen. Coming soon.
Also, disclaimer, you don't have to log into Spotify to listen to this. All guests can listen as well.
True. We're good there.
Yeah. Brent, any parting thoughts or kind of last piece of advice you might offer to somebody that's currently transitioning or already in the civilian world, trying to figure their way out in the wild?
Yeah, reach out, plan early, lean on people, don't be afraid to ask, network aggressively. And actually, don't just send the LinkedIn request, but actually put words in those things. There is a place to do that. Send a message. Don't be afraid to start small. There's multiple things. Maybe you thought military was your life and now it's not. It's a stepping stone. Keep moving forward. Be humble and adaptable. You'll get there. And reach out. Like I said, everyone's here. So let us know.
I love it. Thanks a lot, Brent.
I can't wait to visit your street in Hawaii. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Veteran Ventures Podcast. If you heard something interesting or found the show to be helpful, send it to a friend who is transitioning out of the military or considering a transition. We'd also really appreciate if you left a rating and review of the show. That helps us reach more people with these amazing stories of successful veterans. We'll catch you next time on the Veteran Ventures Podcast. And until then, go do the thing. Make that decision, have that conversation, and go find your next mission.